pretty handy double chin hider though.
When was the last time you used y equals mx plus b?
Gas station 3 days ago.
3 days ago. Gas station 3 days ago. What were you doing?
Buying gas.
Why do you need x plus b?
Hello and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today and for tuning in. My name is Spencer Ruckty. I'm the author events manager here at Third Place Books in Seattle, Washington. I'm very pleased to welcome you to today's conversation between Johnny Evison and Robert Sindelar, who are with us tonight, literally with us, thankfully, to launch Small World, which is Johnny's epic new book that chronicles 170 years of American nation building. We are broadcasting tonight's event from the Den at our Lake Forest Park store in front of a small group of friends and guests. I'm not going to bloviate about how good it is to see a small vaccinated group of literary enthusiasts with us tonight, because last time I did, our live stream setup almost went kaput, so I'm starting to think I'm the problem here. I might be the curse. But we are proud to host a number of exciting events, both virtually and in person this season, which you can find on our website, thirdplacebooks.com. This is also a great time to ask for your kindness and patience tonight. We are booksellers, not audio and visual engineers. This is to say, if we experience any technical difficulties, we'll do our best to get things up and running smoothly again. And for those watching at home, the chat window on the side of your screen is open, and we encourage you to use it respectfully tonight. We'll also be taking some time for your questions at the end of this event, both from our virtual audience and our in-person audience. So if you have any questions for our authors this evening, you can submit those in the chat window. So without further ado, let's get to it. I am very pleased to introduce tonight's speakers. Jonathan Evison's debut novel, All About Lulu, was a breakout hit from Soft Skull Press and the winner of the Washington State Book Award in 2008. Since then, Evison has gone on to publish West of Here, The Revised Fundamentals of Caregiving, This Is Your Life, and Lawn Boy, and more. And in May of last year, he published Legends of the North Cascades to great acclaim, a novel that Willie Vlotton called wildly original and breathtakingly big-hearted. Now, just over half a year after Legends, we're fortunate to be able to gather with a few friends, both in person and virtually, to celebrate the release of Small World. The book, the size of this book, so soon after Johnny's last great novel, is really a testament to Johnny's sheer storytelling energy, as fellow Seattle bookseller Tom at Finney Books calls it. The New York Times wrote yesterday that Small World is, quote, easy to love in part because it deals in generosity and hope. On the floor with us tonight, we're also incredibly fortunate to have Third Place Books' own Robert Sindelar, the managing partner here at the store, and the man with some of the best taste in Seattle, which I'm not obligated to say just because he signs my paychecks. Robert and Johnny are old friends, so tonight is a reminder of why we go through all the trouble of hosting in-person events in the first place. So enough out of me. Let's get to it. Please welcome Johnny Evison and Robert Sindelar.
Thanks for the wipe down, dude. Appreciate it. Nothing personal.
Well, so great to have you here. Great to have all these folks here. First I just want to say congratulations.
Thank you so much. And it's great to see you, and it's great to see everybody in this room. Everybody in this room is special to me, and that's not always the case with audiences. Sometimes I hate half of you. I'm just glad to have anybody, just be in a room with people, and thank you.
Yeah, well, this is and it's so great we're doing it with this book. I mean, this is your second book to be published in less than 12 months.
6 months, yeah.
Wow, yeah. Legends of the North Cascades was one of my favorite books last year. You've gotten an incredible New York Times review on this book. You got a shout out on, was it Good Morning America or Today Show from Jason Mott?
Yeah, that was awesome.
That was pretty cool.
My mom almost fell out of her chair. It takes a lot to impress her, but she always watches Good Morning America.
Good Morning America, right? The question: what fiction should we read? He picks one book. It's pretty great. Yeah. So and it feels like very well deserved. That there's just I was telling Curtis before the event, there's just a ton of talk around this book, a lot of chatter around this book, more than you've had recently, but what you've always deserved. So I'm so happy to see that.
Oh, thank you. Keep talking. I like it. This is good. I need this. I mean, after 30 years of humiliation, it's this is rewarding.
I know a number of people here have read the book, but I think for people who haven't and people who are streaming who haven't, could you just give us like a really short, just basic framework of the book? Well, you know, what's just the general plot?
Well, I mean, I just set out to write the great American novel, you know, and just take a shot at it. And to me, that meant I had to had to tell many different stories across race, across gender, across class, and across time. So it sort of covers 5 generations of American history and the transcontinental railroad as it moves from the eastern seaboard to the west, and then the modern characters are all sort of brought together by fate on a train speeding, and that's the modern moment of it. If you hadn't noticed, we're all on a speeding out of control train, which should actually, now that I think of it, probably be headed south instead of north. But
Right. Yeah. So it takes place in the, 2 kind of distinctly different time periods. One starts in the 1850s. One's basically present day. And I guess, you know, I was reading it. One of the things that I just kept thinking about the whole way through the book. I was just so curious about where you started. Like, what was it? Was it the train accident, which the present day train accident that starts the book off? Was it the idea of the Transcontinental Railroad? Was it one of these characters? Was it one of their stories? What was your starting place for this?
I think really the starting place was the whole conceit of the thing. Just I was on the eve of my 50th birthday. And, you know, I had just published a string of books I'm really proud of, but, I mean, compared to this, they're...
You haven't swung for the fences yet.
Not since West of Here, I think. You know, this one's kind of a companion to West of Here, but, like, I don't know. It's just something about turning 50 is, like, really lit a fire under my ass, and I'm like, I really want to swing for the fences. And so the first thought was, you know, was the conceit itself. Like, I want to write my biggest, most challenging novel, something so ambitious that I could threaten... You know, I could ruin my career. You know what I mean? I wanted to play in a really high stakes game. You know, it's like there's 2 seconds on the clock and I wanted the ball just because I love a challenge. At the end of the day, you know, I mean, I love having an audience, obviously. I love publishing books. I love winning awards and stuff like that. But really, this is something I just have to do. I'm biomanic off the charts, you know, and I have to write. And the more challenge the novel presents, I think the more engaged I am. So I think it brings out the best in me. And so it started there, and then I think the first 2 characters I conceived were Finn and Nora, the twins, because I like this idea, these 2 Irish immigrants coming, and then, well, I don't want to give any spoilers, but
right. Yeah, we'll dance around the spoilers on this book, but really interesting. Well, so there's so many parallels once you get into the story, and I assume that was pretty conscious. I mean, you talked about this train wreck, this train that's barreling towards this accident that we know is going to happen because it's told to us at the beginning of the book. But I felt also, I mean, just the building of the Transcontinental Railroad had that same energy. There are a number of escapes in the book where people are escaping from unfortunate circumstances or horrible circumstances that definitely had the same kind of vibe and same kind of feel, or even the same trajectory almost. How conscious was that for you?
Well, it's kind of like all the characters are a reflection of the fact that, like, they're in a high stakes game. This novel requires action out of everybody. I mean, whether you know, so and as far as the modern train thing goes, I wanted to speak to the current moment in America without writing a political polemic and without it being a bummer. You know what I mean? And so the metaphor of the sort of runaway train was enough for me. But ultimately, I wanted the novel to be more of a salve or a antidote to these times. I wanted to just sort of remind people that you know, we're all in this together. You know, because what was ultimately, you know, or in the beginning, our greatest strength of this American ethos, of this American experiment was our diversity, you know what I mean? And here we've devolved into tribalism. So this was an opportunity to say, you know, it really is still our strength, you know, even though we can't get on the same page about that.
Yeah, that was definitely the small world aspect of what you were writing about was something I felt over and over again as characters were introduced and as the chapters continued, of this sense of you know, just our stories aren't all that different when you get down to it, and that felt like something you really wanted to penetrate there.
Yeah. Again, about the connectivity of all our stories, and just about the connectivity of we're all beholden to our own past. 5 generations ago. I mean, some people, you know, some groups have been lucky enough to be upwardly mobile over those 5 generations, and some people like Lu Yu and John Tully and Layla, and that genealogy has not been as they have not been lucky enough to be upwardly mobile as a group.
Yeah, there's a lot in this book about wealth. There's a lot about striving for wealth, wealth as an ambition, people who have wealth, whether that's actually good for them or bad for them, and that seemed a big preoccupation for you during this.
It's been a preoccupation for me my whole life because I grew up poor on Bainbridge Island, you know what I mean? And so I'd go to my friend's house and I just realized that they were taught differently than me. They were socialized differently than me. They were taught that destiny was a ladder that they could just climb because they had the resources and because they had the belief behind them. And I was taught things like, always expect the worst. The world is made of meat. You know what I mean? These were the aphorisms echoing in my head. And these people just they just went out and got it. And it took my family 5 generations to learn that. You know what I mean? Like, we've been peasants forever. And then I remember one time in the 90s, in one day, I changed it all. And it's going to affect the trajectory of the Evison line going forward, which was, I was writing this pilot for the NFL Network. And they wanted me to head write it. And I met with the producer, and she was kind of wowing me with this idea that, well, we're going to put you up in a house and you're going to be the head writer and you'll have control, and just trying to make it look like a great opportunity. And I'm like, yeah. And she goes, and we're going to pay you $1,200 a month. And I'm like, okay, well, let me talk to Ian about it. And he was the executive producer. And so then I met with Ian the next day. We have lunch. We're eating some French dips. And I just went for it. I finally realized that you had to value yourself and take that impetus. And I got him all excited about my ideas and stuff all over again. He's like, yeah. And I go, but there's one thing. And so and so offered me $1,200, but I want $12,000 a month. And he's like, done. It was that easy. 5 generations, and all I had to just do is like ask for 10 times as much more. And he said the guy didn't even, he just stopped mid-bite, and he's like, all right, done. Sounds reasonable. And so now, like when I was a kid, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to mow the neighbor's lawn. My family's like, how much you going to charge? I was thinking $10. And they're like, well, you better just keep it at $7, because maybe somebody off, you better lowball them, because that was our family ethos, right? Lowball the competition. So when my kid comes to me and I say, he wants to mow a lawn, if he ever has that kind of, God willing, he has that sort of ambition. Hasn't yet, but if he does, and I'm gonna say, well, how much he's thinking $10. I'm like, well, that's an awful big lawn. You should ask for 15, 20. I mean, it just class and money is everything in this culture. Like without the capital, it's just an ism.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. I mean, I'm reflecting back on the book as you're talking about that. I just and realizing how much those attitudes are present with every character, and some of them very much feel that they deserve something and have the right to something, and some are feel shame in asking for help, and almost to their detriment, or definitely to their detriment in some of it. I do feel like I can't go any further without pointing out that while this book's about trains, you're wearing a captain's hat. Yeah,
well, I'm just embracing the skipper look. I've got the Alan Hale physique to match now. I thought it was time to reinvent myself. For 15 years I've been wearing the blue suit with the blue fedora. Look at all the back of my author photos, and I'm like, dude, if I wear that, I'm just gonna look like a fat version of that guy, just like a fat old version. So I need to reinvent myself in some sort of way, and I came up with this is kind of my COVID look. Sweatpants, a dirty shirt, and a $2 novelty hat. I'm just going to embrace it.
It's a new author photo. We'll make sure we get a couple tonight.
It's kind of the Jim Morrison, it's like when you Google Jim Morrison, the first 50 images you get are all from the same Diane Arbus photo shoot, the snake. He's all shirtless and studly, but then you keep scrolling, and pretty soon he's got the big beard, and he just looks like a wino, and he's put on 40 pounds. So I've been just kind of getting a lot of mileage out of that one photo shoot 15 years ago, and it's like, if I'm going to depart from that and own it, I got to have a look worthy of me. And I think this is working.
You got something going on.
All right,
thanks. Good.
People, I'm still getting used to it because I walk down the street and people are like, "Ahoy!" and I'm like,
"Yeah, you're gonna get a lot of ahoys." Yeah. I don't think that'll go away. Yeah. In Legends, your last novel, in this book, in West of Here, which is clearly a companion piece to this book, you play a lot with with time periods, right? Going back and forth between these two time periods, but with a really strong emphasis on place. You seem really interested in the idea of kind of like what happened here, where we're sitting 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 150 years ago. Tell me about that.
Well, part of that is when you write when you're writing something that has, this is something I learned that in West of Here, because West of Here was basically place sort of usurped the position of the protagonist, because there was 60 characters or whatever, but the protagonist was really the place. So I learned that lesson, and in this case I had to build an even grander, because geographically it's set in Ireland, China, and 40 states between the eastern seaboard and the western, well, probably more like 15 or whatever, but part of the importance of place in this becomes that when you have 20 characters, and the goal was to write a book that I never want to write a book where you have to have like a persona dramatis at the beginning, or a key where the reader has to stop and go, now who is this? Who are they related to? It was super important for me for the reader to be able to track the characters. And so that means that every character is going to be off the pages for 60 or 70 pages at a time. They're going to be out of the spotlight, but I had to keep them in the reader's consciousness so they could still track them. And so that's where place comes in, that's where genealogy comes in, that's where incident comes in, that's where coincidence comes in, that's where theme comes in. You just had to build these layers and layers of connectivity so that little light bulbs would go off in the reader's head to remind them of these other characters. Even though I wasn't addressing those characters for another 70 pages, I needed them to be in there, and I could do that by setting them in the same places, or have them say similar things, or be in similar situations. So I didn't really approach this novel from a place standpoint the way I did, but place just became a way to
connect
continuity.
Yeah, I was wondering about the there is a lot of coincidence in terms of characters, whether in the same time period or across time periods, connecting without giving away spoilers. Did any of those surprise you, or were all of them kind of
I don't know if surprise is the right word. I just discovered more. I knew how necessary it was, so I just kept looking for more and more opportunities. And even after the novel was done, and I had probably a publishable draft, I was still looking for opportunities to add connectivity somehow, and to reverse engineer it through the whole novel. I mean, this novel is just, it doesn't hold together without that connectivity. It really is about connectivity, thematically, form. Everything about this book is about that connectivity, and that's what I when I say I wanted it to be kind of an antidote to the times, it's like that's what we're lacking right now. I feel like it's just this sense of connectivity. With everything is so fractured and tribal, and I wanted to write all these different characters with diverse backgrounds and make them all, obviously all my characters are always flawed, but I think they're characters that people root for, you know what I mean? And I think that the more flawed they are and the harder they are to redeem, I think the more connected readers come from. I think I learned so much with every book. The goal is just to learn stuff, and I'm really learning now that the key to writing a great book is to really always think about the reader. Like, what does the reader know? And I don't mean like the female 35 to 70 demographic when I say reader. It's just me on the other end, but it keeps you honest because you're doing this dance and the reader's doing everything you're doing backwards and heels, and by really keeping track of just how you dispense the information of the story, it creates all these opportunities, and it's really your greatest tool. I mean, without that, then you don't have wonderful conventions like misdirect. It's so fun to kind of sort of subtly misdirect the reader and then, pull the rug out from under the. So when I'm writing a book now, I really think about what I love to read. I'm writing more like a reader. I feel like every great reader has the capacity to write a great novel. They probably just don't have the time or the commitment or the energy.
I love that Spencer mentioned in his introduction that that quote from the New York Times about generosity in this book, and the generosity that you find through the characters. And I think that what you just described is why that's there, and why that's felt, which I definitely felt over and over again as I kind of noticed the connections between these people, and felt deeply for them. I mean, I cared about all these folks and wanted the best for them, even though clearly that wasn't going to be the case for a few.
Yeah, I just, as an aside, I cut like 8 characters out of this. I mean, not because I didn't love some of my favorite characters. I had to kill some darlings just because I knew I had to make everything coalesce, and they just weren't serving the larger picture as well, and so I had to cut them out.
And from talking to you previously, and just kind of when you write sometimes online about your writing process and where you are in a book, you are a pretty big outliner. Or at least I got the sense that this was a pretty outlined book.
This one by necessity. I mean, my first, altogether I've written like 17 books, but like not nine of them aren't published or whatever. But I used to be that writer that wanted to sort of grope my way through and discover it as I went along, and I still believe that's a great way to go about it, but I have 3 kids. You know what I mean? It's like I have to be like a taskmaster on myself. So I've been outlining more as I get older, just as a matter of course. And with this, if I didn't, I'm just asking for a mess. So I was prepared enough with this one that there came a point in the middle where I almost blew it up with a 3rd generation in between the two. It was one night. It was one of my work days. It was like a Wednesday, and I just drank beer in the garage all day. And I basically sketched out all the characters to go in between, Jenny and Todd and Wu Chen and Brianna and Malik and Othello George and all the 3rd generation that would have been in the early 20th century, in the teens to the 20s. And I figured out how to kind of make it work, but I had to make a decision right then. Am I going to blow this thing up, or am I going to just keep going down this path that I've got a good handle on? I just wanted it to even be more challenging. Once I figured out I could make it work, my impulse was just to make it even harder on myself, but I think I wisely chose not to, because I just thought at the end of the day it was just too big of an ask. I think I would lose narrative momentum, and I think I could have pulled it off, but then I think it would become limited in its audience and who I could reach, and it would be.
That could be a great other book, though. I mean, you wouldn't want to do it in the same structure as this book, but I felt myself wanting to know about those characters. I was thinking about that as once we got about halfway through the book, where you really started. You saw the framework, and you saw this generation, you saw the other generation, you met all the characters. I did on certain stories. Definitely was wondering about, okay, 2 generations down the line. So this guy's grandfather. I want to know that guy's story, which you mentioned some of them in passing, but that could be a really cool other book.
That's also kind of the reason I like to use that bifurcated timeline. I used it in West of Here too, like putting 120 or 170 years between them, is because that naturally happens for the reader. You pull all this in between history in just intuitively. It's like a world building exercise for the reader, because the reader, it almost fills itself in. But another reason I decided not to is because that was going to be sort of a labor part of it, and Jess beat me to it. It's just the zeitgeist. Jess Walter, he did his labor novel. We all kind of arrive at some of these same things, and that was another reason I was glad I didn't do it, because that was going to be kind of more the labor, and Jess nailed it with his book. So I don't know where I was going with that, but.
Yeah. Let's see. Maybe diving a little deeper into the book, or just some details of the book. There's a basketball game in this book. It is one of the best. It's not that long, but it is one of the best. Being a fan, it's one of the best descriptions of basketball I've read in fiction. Which there aren't a lot, and they're not usually done that well. And that was that something you knew was going to be in the book?
No, I knew it had to be once I knew who Malik was. I mean, I knew I had to get to that. Well, Invitational. I did write one more other basketball scene that was I liked writing in Lulu, my first book, which was when the twins play pickup down at Venice Beach. But this was different. This was a little more X's and O's, and it was a higher level of competition. And I love the language of sports. Like I'm cooking up a boxing novel in my head just because I love the language of boxing. There's just so many great idioms and stuff. Like all the sap went out of his legs, and there's so much great lively language with basketball. And I'm glad you said it wasn't too long, because I'm just thinking about casual readers who aren't basketball fans. I had to make sure I wrote that in a way that they would still get it, and
Yeah, no. It felt. It definitely had. It was that like mini. It was a mini movie within.
Yeah,
within
you
the
and
book.
I could read a whole novel where it was just a game, but like I wanted to make sure I didn't lose anybody on that. So I'm glad to hear it wasn't too long. But yeah, it's action. Action is just so fun to write. You know what I mean? In a basketball game, it's just all action.
Cool. Yeah, I like that a lot. I want to. Can I ask you a question about Legends?
Of course.
Yeah. So this is a question. When I read the book, I was describing the book to my family as I was reading along.
And they were like, "Oh gosh, a novel about a guy in a cave. That sounds really thrilling."
No, they liked it, but this is a question my daughter, literally, this is like before the book was published. My daughter, 15-year-old daughter, said you have to text him and ask him this question. I'm like, I'm not going to ask him.
Why?
But I'm asking you now. Okay, is the Twilight reference in the book intentional, or did that just happen? That was her question.
Oh, did I make a Twilight reference?
You did.
What was it? And I'll tell you if it was intentional.
Well, the main character's name, I only know this because of my 15-year-old daughter. The
Okay.
main character's name is Bella, which is the main character.
Oh yeah,
in
no,
Twilight.
totally not. I never watched a single
She,
word.
with a single dad in a relatively close part of the country where those novels take place. And at the very end, Bella becomes friends with Jacob.
Oh God, no, I'm ashamed. I know, nothing against Stephanie Meyer. I once did a signing in a strip mall in Bakersfield, where it was my first tour. It was more of a band tour, you know. Now I got it pretty good. They put you in a hotel, give you a per diem, they fly you around. Well, back then it was just me and two buddies and farting in a motorhome. And one of our stops was this glamorous bookstore in a strip mall in Bakersfield, and they set me up for my signing just right in front of like a 20-foot Stephanie Meyer cardboard cutout. It was such an exercise in humiliation, and people were just streaming into the store, and then they were just walking right by me because there was like some manga thing going on in back, and it was awful. But
you absorbed it at that moment. And,
Yeah.
and it seeped into you, and it came out in Legends. That's what happened.
Because I've never watched a movie. I
figured.
I would figure that I might have accidentally made a Twilight reference in this book because Layla actually ends up in Forks in the middle of the night or something.
I was waiting
But
for
yeah,
it.
No,
when she got
that
when
was
she was
not
going
on
to Forks,
purpose.
I was waiting for it.
Jeez, I mean, I like to pay homage to people, but it's usually not Twilight. You know what I mean? There's a few nods to Dickens in here or something like that, but yeah, and I did. That was, unless she wants it to be, and then tell her it was. I don't want to disappoint her, so. Go ahead. Whatever you want to tell her. You're the parent here.
Well, good. I was hoping I could at least one question.
Yeah, no, I didn't know her name was Bella, and I didn't know the Jacob thing. I didn't know anything about it. Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Would it seem really clever if I did do it on purpose? Because I can start saying I did.
I thought it was a weird nod to make, considering the audience for that book. But
No, it wasn't.
But I was like, well, Johnny's got kids. You know, maybe his kids are obsessed with Twilight just like my daughter is.
No, my kids are obsessed with video games. Unfortunately, I'm determined to make readers out of them, but we'll see.
We're going to go to audience questions in a minute. I did want
Really already?
Oh, you know,
Okay.
in a minute or two. I'm just getting people prepared so they are ready with their questions.
Good. Be ready, because that first one, you know how that goes. It's like pulling teeth to get that first one, and then they finally open up.
I think this group's that's not going to be a problem.
Okay, I hope so.
You are, as you mentioned at the beginning, you didn't use these words, but you are a writing workaholic. I mean, you're nonstop. You're constantly working. You've got story. It seems like I feel like, sometimes I just got a galley of your new book, and I look on social media, and you're talking about 2 books down the road that you just finished, or 3 books down the road that you just finished. So I'd love to hear a little bit about what's in the hopper.
Well, I finished the next one.
Yeah.
And it came out of here, but I'm not publishing it next. One of the characters I told you, his name is Alejo Guzman. He had to leave the novel because part of it was just because his scion, his modern counterpart, I couldn't get the person on the train. It just wasn't working, and I didn't want to stretch the bounds of credulity trying to get him on the train. But I wrote a Western about him, but I don't think it's the novel I want to publish next because it comes out of this world. So I want to go somewhere else first, and so I'm about 100 pages into a novel. It's a reincarnation novel. It's called Again and Again. At first I was going to call it Again and Again and Again, and I even considered Again and Again and Again and Again, but I think I just settled on Again and Again. But while we were deciding at Dutton whether I was going to publish the Western, which is called Last of the Californios, next, or Again and Again, or Again and Again and Again and Again, whatever I decide on, I think it'll just be Again and Again, but we'll come back to this again. I needed to do something because it was just we were kind of debating back and forth whether we do it, and my editor had some questions about the Western, and so I was sort of cogitating on how to sell him my plan for what the rewrite would look like and stuff, but I needed something to do. I mean, I'm a compulsive writer, and so I wrote a feature screenplay called Grim and Barrett about a failing dental practice, just because I needed to write something, and it was so fun. I loved it. It was really funny, and get it, Grim and Barrett. See what I did there? No, but it's really good. It's a very good modern comedy of manners. And I wrote that because I just needed to. It's not because I wanted to be a screenwriter. It's just because I knew I couldn't sink my feet back into one of the novel yet. Because once I'm committed to the novel, I'm going to be there. So I thought, let's let this thing play out. We're in pre-pub for this book. There's no hurry. And so the plan was, and the plan is now, is I'm going to try to sell Grim and Barrett so that I can write the screenplay for This Is Your Life, Harriet Chance, which is still at Focus, but they've had like 3 screenwriting teams, and apparently they're not happy with the script. Laura Dern's attached, and I mean, it looks like it would be ready to go if there were a good script. But like Hollywood doesn't like novelists as screenwriters. They want them. The only reason I was allowed on the set of the Fundamentals of Caring, as they called it, was because I was like I wasn't proprietorial about it. It's like, this is yours now, run with it. And so they're like, great, why don't you come on set? I mean, otherwise they're like, I get it, because they figure a novelist can't, and the dictates of a screenplay in a 400-page novel and a 20,000 word screenplay are so different. So, but I figure if I could sell Grim and Barrett and I can see I'm a great screenwriter, then I could throw my hat in the ring, and because I really want to see Harriet made into a movie. I think it would be a great movie, and so that's what I'm up to. And then I got the boxing novel I want to write. But
boxing novel. When are we going to get your rock and roll novel?
I've been going back and forth for that forever, and I talked to my rock and roll friends about it, and because so many of my friends that are in bands and stuff are big readers, like they're huge readers, and I'm like, I can't think of that many great rock and roll novels. And I can't figure out the reason why, and I'll ask them, why do you think it? Why? And nobody has an answer. I'm just, for whatever reason, I'm just not that compelled to. Partially because of, probably the social and political blowback I'll get from all my rock star friends. That'll be like, dude, you haven't been in a band since you were 15. I mean, and also I don't know. I just don't. For whatever reason, it doesn't compel me.
Yeah, that's interesting. I always assume that, like, I'm going to hear about your next book, and that's what it's going to be. Just because obviously you're so in that world.
It's a great question because it seems like a no-brainer, but I just, for whatever reason, it's like writing a memoir. I'm not compelled to do that. My agent's been after me to write a memoir forever, and I'm like, I don't know. I'm resistant to the idea. I guess what it is that I want to write outside the purview of my personal experience so much that I don't want to draw. I mean, I want to draw my personal experience when it involves like jobs, because your characters have to have jobs, you know what I mean? So I've written about a caregiver, I've written about a landscaper, I've used I haven't written the telemarketing sunglasses. I should write that novel. Note to self, I actually telemarketed sunglasses at one point, and that is not an easy sell. Okay? I mean, you've got like some 70-year-old woman on the floor, and you're like, I think they'd look really good on you. Well, they're black and kind of a square lens, and I've sorted Rotten Tomatoes for the United I mean, I feel like I'll use all that stuff, but like, it's only window dressing just because your characters need jobs and stuff like that. Other than that, I want to write beyond my experience. That's the whole point. I want to feel like I can accrue. But the key to that is that you always have to have people to keep you honest and vet it. Like when I wrote Legends of the North Cascades, I'm not a 3-time Iraq combat veteran, obviously, but I have friends who were, and so I really leaned on them heavily. I didn't ask them for scenes or anything. I use them later. I imagine the scene. I never want the research to get in the way of the story I'm compelled to tell. So I would write the scenes, and then I would give them to them, and I'd say just be merciless. And like my friend Paul would come back with like, this sounds like a fucking Navy Federal commercial. What the fuck's a chew? I mean, they're hard on you because as a reader, you hit one false note, and it could be the author's lost you.
Did you change anything significant in that book because of that?
Oh, well, a lot of it was language and just, there were some things where I had characters, like I had some graphic depictions of violence that were being discussed, I think, at one point between two veterans, and he was like, we wouldn't talk about it that way. Or so there's things like that. Nothing so much major, but it was so instructive. And I always, what I try to do is, with that stuff is, like I said, I try to write the scene and know what I need to happen in the scene, and then I find my expert. Like when the baby's born in Revised Fundamentals, where they deliver the baby at Yellowstone, at Old Faithful or whatever. Obviously, I've caught a few babies. Every time I'm like, man, that doctor is drunk. I figured it out. I finally figured this out in the age of, this is one thing I've learned during COVID. 2 babies in a row, I'm like, man, that guy just came off the 18th hole. Something smells like gin in here. I mean, because he's a little late getting here. And I'm like, I finally figured out it's the hand sanitizer. I'm so used to the smell now because I'm walking around every day going, somebody smells like booze. And I finally figured out that's why I always think the delivery doctor is drunk. It's because of the hand sanitizer. I don't know where I was going with that. But
You only got 2 doctors fired after that?
Yeah, right. What it is? Oh, so what I was saying is like, so I got my friend Dave Coates, where he's a EMT, and he's delivered like 18 babies or something. So I go, here's a situation. We sit down, we got a beer. I go, here's a situation. This happens. What happens next? Where does he go back? And he walks me through it. He goes, well, here you'd cut the ligature. Here you would do this. Here you do that. And so I have somebody to walk me through it, so I don't hit any false notes. But ultimately, I've got to try to make the research work for me versus the other way. Because, I mean, if I'm going to research the Underground Railroad and the Transcontinental Railroad and the whole history of America, dude, I could be researching for 30 years if I'm going to cast a net that wide. And I know from experience, because I kind of did that with west of here, that you just end up in a lot of cul-de-sacs, or you find a bunch of stuff that's super compelling and you're like, God, now I kind of want to write that book or something.
You try to work it in, maybe artificially.
Yeah, or you talk to like 30 old dudes in Port Angeles that are like, well, you can't write a book about Port Angeles without talking about Wheeler's Corner. And I'm like, oh, fuck. I'm just going to change it to Port Bonita, you know what I mean? Because once the research gets in the way of the story I want to write, I mean, you know what I mean? You could drive yourself insane, and I abhor research. I really do. I've gotten adept at it, but I'm learning to cut every corner I possibly can. And that just requires that I know what I need to happen so I can ask very specific questions and make sure that my scenes are credible or authentic or whatever.
Yeah. How conscious are you of changing up style between books or between projects? Is that it's because it seems like you do, and I wonder if you just do that just to kind of keep yourself agile, or if where does that come from?
Yeah, well, I had a pattern going for a while where it was first person, third person limited, first person, third. I mean, it was like every other book, and the style changes just according to according to what the book dictates. I think they all feel like they're the same author, even though they're really different. Mostly just because of my ethos. Mostly because I'm not going to forsake my characters. I'm usually, I don't write Hollywood endings, but it's you're usually going to get something hopeful for me.
They've got a lot of heart. They all have a lot of heart, and you feel that, I think, in a very
it's all an
way.
act. I'm a dick. So, but. No, they do. I mean, dude, I spent on the day. You probably saw that on Facebook. I've spent the day weeping. I couldn't even get to the New York Times review. Everybody was just kind of saying, "Oh, congratulations on your rave in the New York Times," and I'm like, meanwhile, going around the house and every device in the house and hitting a paywall, going, "There's got to be one device where I haven't hit my limit of New York Times articles." But no, and I'm not going to be duped into because they get it's only $1 for a first month, and then it's like $50 a month for the rest of your life. And I've tried to get off that before. I'm still paying for Boingo Wi-Fi. I don't even think the company exists anymore because I used to use it on the ferry. And I swear to God, man, I'm still paying $10, $9.99 a month for that shit.
So Johnny Evison lessons from tonight. Shortcut your research.
Yeah.
Avoid paying for
Don't go for the
journalism.
$1 a month deals because there's some fine print there. It just keeps cycling. It's impossible. It's like alimony or something. You're just never going to get out of it. Not that I pay alimony. Fuck that stuff. I'm never going to do that. I'm just...
And I think this is a perfect time to see if people have some questions about your lack of alimony payments, or hopefully something about the book.
Whatever you want, but I'm telling you, this is the slope. Folks watching on the live stream, this is the time to go make a sandwich while everyone's like...
And if there are people who are streaming, if you put a question in the chat or in the questions, we'll get it and I'll ask it. We have a question over here.
Oh, thank God.
As you move from inspiration to actually writing, part of your process is developing your character biographies. When do you
As soon as I know what they want.
I'm just going to repeat, just for the people at home. In developing characters, at what point does Johnny know when he knows enough about the character to go into the story?
That was good, dude. I smoke way too much pot to repeat that quickly. If you said it 3 years ago, I'd remember it wrote. But just like that, I was like, oh, God, I should probably. I like creamy peanut butter better. It's all about character for me. So the answer to the question really is the minute I know what the character wants. It's all about what does my character want, because the whole panoply of human drama is between these two signposts of, what is the character currently, what are the circumstances of their life, and what is their ideal life? How do they, who are they ideally? And so the whole thing is all of drama is just getting from that point to that point. My characters usually wind up only about here, I mean, Krigg quits smoking pot and moves to Aberdeen in west of here, and he's the hero of the book. It doesn't sound like a lot, but like that's a big change for it. So it all comes about once I know what the characters want, all I got to do is set them on that path. It really doesn't matter. Like, I don't write scenes as set pieces. I know some writers block out their scenes as set pieces. I want to have a scene that does this. I want to have a scene I have to have this. I don't. I let those things come to me depending on what the character needs. My job is to create a character that wants something and then just put as many obstacles in their path as possible to make them make decisions. Because when we talk about character, people think, oh, character means he wears Hawaiian shirts, or he's funny, or he has a funny laugh, or a facial tic. That's characterization. Character is really when we talk about character, is decisions. So all I need is character to want something, and I set them on their path, and the obstacles present themselves sort of naturally as I give myself to the character. But what needs to happen is every time that character makes a decision, it complicates their journey. It usually makes it harder. But that's what character is decision. Every time your character makes a decision, and then it complicates their journey. And then that, in turn, is what plot is to me. Those are the machinations of plot.
Do you think, I've heard other writers talk about this, and I'm curious, do you think that's where characterization comes out of? Does characterization stem from that? So the want and what they need is their character, and then does the characterization come out of as how they deal with those obstacles, or?
Well, it could work either way. I mean, sometimes I will start with a characterization. Like, I mean, there's a character I want to write who's based on my old buddy Steve Nelson, the drummer for my punk band March of Crimes, who's like, God love you, Steve, if you're out there. He's going to kill me for this. But he is like, he's got a ton of nervous energy, right? And he's always just kind of wound up. Like, he's just really wound up. But the guy wears the most comfortable clothing ever. You know what I mean? And I just sort of like this dichotomy between, he's just got these, it's always like, loose waistband. There's nothing constricting. He just always looks comfortable, but inside there, he's just like, you know what I mean? So that could be a characterization that actually speaks to the character. You know what I mean? If you can marry those two things, like I remember John Fante, for example, like his, when he would write about his dad or his grandfather, I forget which it is, but like he described he was a wino. His dad was a wino, but I remember him. He described his eyes as looking like squashed grapes. You know what I mean? So that's like an example of like where the characterization is married to the character. I mean, if you didn't put that together, squashed grapes is wine. You know what I mean? But it serves as a physical description, but it also speaks to the moral character or the center of the character. So those things kind of happen in conjunction. Yeah, I never just start with just a quirk, which is why I haven't written the character with the comfort. But eventually, I'll find the vehicle.
Maybe he'll be a boxer.
Yeah, possibly.
All right, I thought I saw another hand somewhere in here. Yeah, there we go. That's a go.
Thanks, Charisse. Charisse Flynn, also a.k.a. Allison Reese, author. There you go. You can move the camera that way.
The question for people at home was just about timeline and whether kind of present day circumstances, specifically maybe even COVID, affected it.
I finished it before COVID, but I still like this question because I'm not ready. I'm okay with being topical, but I'm not ready to be the guy that writes a novel where everyone's wearing face masks. So even if I hadn't, I still would have said it in 2019. You know what I mean? That's just one of those like practical elements I don't want to have to work around. And I don't want to live there. I already wrote a novel about self-isolation accidentally that, came out. I wrote that one before I wrote Legends of the North. I mean, self-isolation is the theme of the novel. And as soon as I finished it, COVID hit, you know what I mean? So, yeah, I want to be topical, but I'm never somebody who wants to write something that's just like hot off the presses or anything. I'm always looking at the universal, how to speak to the moment, but in a universal way that doesn't involve making a lot of pop culture or political references. I don't want to ground my reader so much in a topical way because I don't know, I want somebody to be reading my books in 50 years and I don't want to know, I don't want to make Skeet Ulrich, I don't want to make Skeet Ulrich, I did make a Skeet Ulrich in Revised Fundamentals of Caregiving. Ben said I used to be compared to Skeet Ulrich, and I had to change it to Johnny Depp because I soon realized that nobody's going to remember who Skeet Ulrich was in 50 years. They don't remember him now, but he's a damn good-looking dude. And people used to say I look like him, and look at me now. Can you believe it? I used to look like Skeet fucking Ulrich, and now I look like Alan Hale, who's a good-looking, larger man, but...
Were there other questions from the audience? Yes.
I have a question about location. And when I read Lulu, the first thing I recognized in it, aside from the characters, was where they were because I grew up there, and I knew the streets and I knew the places and the visuals that accompany those characters. So his question about your characters and like knowing who they are, how geocentric is that? I mean, you got like really specific places in a number of your works. Lawn Boy, I know those places, right? Are these characters built around the place? Or do you find the place for them after you write the character?
Dude, I'm distracted because your mask is doing this really cool thing where it looks like Planet of the Apes right now because it's sticking to your lips and it's black and it's kind of. But I think Robert, can you remember all that?
Yeah,
it's a really good question.
Yeah,
I like it. But I got to admit, I got distracted because it's sticking to his lips and it looks like his mouth is like this wide, going like this.
So since Johnny got distracted by the mask and doesn't remember the question,
the
question was basically that in some of your novels about Lulu, in Lawn Boy, for the people who grew up in those areas, those streets are very familiar, and place is such an important part. I think place is really important in this. Obviously, West of Here, place was the character of the book, as you said, and so. When does that come in? How important is that to you at the beginning of the book?
Right, and I think he said, "Are they geocentric?" That's that's when I finally stopped
You
looking
were
at
listening.
From the place, or did the place get described?
I think a little of both. Like, okay, so the Santa Monica thing, like my dad was actually a bodybuilder, which, I mean, is probably pretty obvious. And my brother was a bodybuilder. And so I actually grew up, like, in the summers at, like, Gold's Gym. And, like, that was actually one of my more autobiographical novels. And so I just remember at that point, all my novels since have really been more Washington-centric. But for some reason, at that point in my development as a writer, I felt like I was too close to Washington and I couldn't write about it yet. So I wrote that California novel. And definitely in that case, like I always wanted, Lulu almost became a movie, and I always wanted to be at the casting call for those bodybuilding twins because you would see something, you'd be surprised. You go, where are they going to find bodybuilding twins? Like, you ever been to Venice? And you know what I mean? Like, there's, like, I mean, you would find. I just wanted to be at the casting call for that. And like Mike living on the res in Suquamish, very much, the people are very much attached to the place. Yeah, and all the characters in Port Angeles. The one reading I ever did where I was scared. You know, back in the days when I wore my suit and my fedora before I was a slob, I would always wear that, except the first reading I did in Port Angeles, because I didn't grow up in Port Angeles. I grew up playing sports against Port Angeles teams, and I'd camped there a bunch of times. But like it was such an intimate novel about Port Angeles, even though I called it Port Bonita, that I was scared shitless that they were going to tar and feather me or something. And like 100 people showed up, and I'm like, oh shit, I dressed down for that one. I think I wore like some Carhartts or something. Like I didn't want to look like the city slicker, you know. And actually, they said, dude, did you grow up here? You really nailed it. You know what I mean? You can write outside of your experience. You know, I spent enough time there, but they were very geocentric. I mean, I got eyes, I've got ears, I've observed Port Angeles. And there's also this sort of universal idea of what that town is about. We all know what a bus town looks like, and we all know what a closed video store looks like, and you know, a lonely gas station and all the rest of it. But so I think the two things work in conjunction. I mean, the characters definitely come out of the place, but sometimes, you know, the place I think does shape the character. Sure. Did
Yeah, you got it. You got it.
It was enough.
I'll take. We'll take a couple from the virtual audience. I think some of these you kind of address, so you can let me know if you have more to say on them. The one was said, did you cut anything from this epic novel? Which you did talk about what you did. Maybe I'll change it to, was there anything that really hurt to cut from the novel?
Alejo Guzman, but I wrote a book about him, so it was all right. And I would say, honestly, I cut about 200 pages. And just while I'm on the subject, my goal was to have a book that was called Small something, but that was just a doorstop. I mean, it's kind of a cheap joke. I was going to write this other novel called Tiny about gentrification, and it was going to be like 1,000 pages. I hope my publisher doesn't get mad, but they whittled this sucker down under 500. The chapters start way up high, and I'm like, man, I wanted it to be a doorstop. I'm like, I was like, just start the chapters a little lower. You know what I mean?
Right.
I wanted some more girth. I wanted this to break some toes if they dropped it, but I think it's thick enough. They're calling it an epic, so I'm satisfied. But yeah, it was 200 pages longer before I cut out, you know, because I cut out roughly about a third of the characters.
Yeah. Someone is asking, how do reviews affect your writing? You know, so reading that New York Times review, does that outside of, you know, either, you know,
it doesn't affect my writing, it just affects my mood.
Yeah.
I love reviews. I mean, I'll read I'll get the shit sandwich review and laugh about it. I have really thick skin, but Curtis will tell you, as we were driving around to 12 bookstores today, I was pretty jazzed about my Christian Science Monitor review, calling it a modern classic. So every like couple of miles, I'd say, Curtis, have I read you my blurb from the Christian Science Monitor? I mean, look, it's an exercise in humiliation being a writer. I was starved for 20 years. I mean, I'm going to soak back the two parts of the process I like are actually writing the book and then sitting in a chair and reading glowing reviews. The rest of it's kind of a pain in the ass, but it is kind of fun to, and I don't give myself much time. I beat myself up a lot. If you know me, I've got a lot of self-loathing. But I do enjoy a nice blurb like masterpiece or, you know what I mean? I'm going to soak it up. Yeah, I'm going to soak it up. So it affects my mood more than anything, but I got thick skin. I can take it. I mean, you know, I know people that are pretty attached to it and they'll like answer back a bad Goodreads review. I just look at it and I just like, you know, face palm, whatever.
Right.
All I really care about is like, you know, I remember I cried the first time I got Janet Maslin in the New York Times, and I hadn't even read the review yet. It didn't matter. She could have panned me. I'm just like, hell yes, I got the lead review in the New York Times. That's what mattered. Right. It doesn't matter. All that matters is you're part of the conversation. Just to be reviewed, I'm so lucky. Yeah. Even if my book gets panned, I'm not going to write some angry screed to the reviewer. You misread my book. You didn't understand. I'm just like, you know, I sent him a thank you. Hey, thanks for reviewing my book. And nobody remembers. I can't tell you how many times people said, oh, I read a great review of you in the New York Times. And I'm thinking back, oh my God, they just eviscerated it. I'm like, thanks. People don't remember. It's just name recognition. So anytime you're reviewed, it's a good thing. You got to have thick skin. You really do. When I was 21, oh my God. You know, you give it to your friend and they go, I don't really understand. Well, I did that on purpose. Don't you understand? That's because, you know, I mean, I was so defensive about it. Now I'm just, whatever, man. Thanks for reading it and thanks for talking about it. I'm just glad it's putting bread on my table, you know?
There's a question here, which you answered the first part of it at the beginning because you said you started with the idea of writing the great American novel, and that's what this question's about.
And I start a lot of them when I think about it. Like when I wrote Lulu, I had already written 7 novels. It's like, you know what? I think this is the one that'll probably finally break through. I want to start with a coming of age because it just seems like a good entree onto the literary stage. People like one of those from a young author. Well, I wasn't young, but they didn't know it. They want to kind of talk to you like a friend novel, like, you know. And so I decided to start there. And when I was done, I consciously with West of Here, it was similar to this. It's like I really want to swing for the fences on this one, you know. I showed him I got some chops and I can write characters and be funny and stuff. This one I want to show that I can formally challenge myself and write something more ambitious. And so that's where it often starts, is just how can I challenge myself? It's really more like an athlete approaches stuff, you know what I mean? Like guys in gyms, they're like, I'm going to see if I can bench press 340 now, you know.
So the follow-up
And
part-
when you can't, you're like, get it off my neck. You know.
the follow-up question then is how do you think you did?
I'm really proud of the novel. I feel great about
but
it.
in that great American novel tradition, do you feel like you?
I don't feel like I even
know.
know what the tradition is. You know what I mean? Like I did some. You know, I looked into the GAN, and it's just so. It's such a divergent bunch of novels. I mean, Lolita, Moby Dick, The Invisible Man. Like there's so many different. There's no. It was more about defining what I thought the great American novel was. And for me, that was a novel that spoke to the present moment in America, one that tackled the American ideal and the ethos, one that embodied all its history, one that finally, like, honestly faced this sort of entitled idea of manifest destiny and slavery. I mean, manifest destiny is just sort of an extension of slavery. This country was built on free labor, and manifest destiny was just sort of an extension of that. I mean, what did it give us? It gave us genocide and diaspora. So I wanted to take an honest, unflinching look at that as it's a part of our nation building, but at the same time, I didn't want to discount some of the virtues of the American experiment idea. I love the idea of diversity. I love the idea of pluralism and taking all these strengths from all these different cultures and building the greatest, you know. I still actually get choked up about it because, you know, it seems like it's dead. But
but well, that,
go America!
Well, but what's interesting is it is very much it's a hopeful novel. There is despite all the crap that you write about that happens in it, it is very much it's the novel from an optimist. I felt somebody who has faith in what we do and how we live together.
And you know, dude, it's been hard. You know, the last 5 years, I used to, if you had asked me 6 years ago, I would have told you, you know, 9 out of 10 people are wonderful, and you know, 1 out of 10 is just a raving narcissist. You know, and they're the problem. And now I'm just, you know, it's just getting whittled down every year. And I look at the election results, and I'm like, well, geez, now it's 50. I still, you know, I wanted to speak to this without it being a political polemic. Listen, we all have friends and family members that are on the other side of the aisle politically from us, and as much as heinous as some of their beliefs seem to us, we still know that deep down there is a human being that is worthy and that we love somehow, and then that we have to keep peeling back the onion and really understand how they arrived at a place that's diametrically opposed to us, and you know, we still. You know, I mean, it's just too easy to write people off. I mean, it's getting easier and easier, and I don't think anybody benefits from that. So I wanted to write a novel that doesn't give a nod to either side of the aisle, that just says, like, these are a whole bunch of human stories that, you know, are all American, and they're all woven together, and, you know, you decide.
Well, I think so many of us, what we get out of great literature and great fiction is finding that empathy and finding those common threads, and that is literally what this book's all about. So thank you.
I just can't do it. I can't not be hopeful. I just don't. I mean, I can get. I mean, we need all kinds of literature. I mean, I love Cormac McCarthy, but I can't live there, dude. I mean, I can't. I like Bret Eaton Ellis, but I can't write a serial killer novel, dude. I don't want to live there. I don't want to, you know, I don't want to have to, because you have to inhabit that character, and I just don't want to live there. So, I mean, I can have the most flawed character in the world, but somewhere in them, I got to find the good and mind the good, you know.
Well, this is great. This is so great having you. We're gonna sign some books now. We're gonna you'll be able to visit with some of your friends. But just thank you so much for the book. Thank
man,
you for
thank you
2
guys,
books
and
this
thanks
year.
everybody for
And
coming.
thanks for coming out and doing this. It's
I
just
loved
so
it.
great
Thank
to
you.
have an author in our
Sorry, I
store.
got misty. Jesus, I tried. Still a lot of